It started like any other late-night drive, the road stretching out before me like a dark ribbon under the moonlight. The highway was eerily empty, the hum of my car's engine, the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. I was on my way home from a friend's party, a little past midnight, with a thermos of lukewarm coffee keeping me company. The road twisted and turned through thick woods, the trees looming like shadowy sentinels on either side. My high beams carved through the darkness, illuminating patches of the asphalt and the occasional reflective road sign. I turned on the radio for company, but the static was worse than the silence, so I switched it off again. That's when I saw her, a figure standing on the shoulder of the road up ahead, barely visible in the weak moonlight. She was drenched, her white dress clinging to her frame, her long hair plastered to her face. I slowed down, instinctively wary. There wasn't a house or a town for miles. What was she doing out here alone in the middle of the night? I pulled over, rolling down the passenger side window. "Do you need help?" I called out. She didn't answer, just stood there shivering, her face hidden by her hair. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the doors and gestured for her to get in. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door and slid into the seat. The interior light flickered as the door closed, plunging us back into darkness. "Are you okay?" I asked, glancing at her. She was staring straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded and put the car back into drive. "Where are you headed?" "Just ahead," she replied vaguely. "I'll tell you where to stop." The unease settled in my stomach like a rock. Something about her wasn't right. Her dress, though soaked, looked old-fashioned, like something out of a period drama, and her bare feet were covered in mud, but there wasn't a speck of dirt on the pristine white fabric. We drove in silence for a while, the tension in the car thick enough to cut with a knife. Every so often I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. She hadn't moved an inch since getting in. Her hands remained clasped, her head bowed, her face hidden by that curtain of hair. I was about to ask her another question when the radio, which I hadn't turned back on, crackled to life. A garbled voice whispered through the static, indistinct but unsettling. I reached out to turn it off, but the volume dial wouldn't budge. "Stop here," she said suddenly, her voice sharper now. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense forest. "Here?" I asked, my voice shaky. "There's nothing here." "Here," she insisted, finally turning to look at me. Her eyes were wrong. They weren't just empty. They were black holes, voids that seemed to suck the light out of the air around them. A chill ran down my spine, and my breath caught in my throat. I can't stop here," I stammered, pressing the gas pedal. But the car wouldn't move. The engine sputtered and died, the dashboard lights flickering before going dark. "What the hell?" I muttered, fumbling with the keys. "Don't fight it," she said, her voice eerily calm now. I turned to face her fully, panic taking hold. But she wasn't in the seat anymore. The passenger door was still closed, the seatbelt buckled, but she was gone. I whipped my head around, scanning the darkness outside the car. That's when I saw her again, standing in the middle of the road, her hair billowing despite the still air. Her dress was dry now, and it shimmered like it was made of moonlight. "You shouldn't have stopped," she said, though her lips didn't move. My chest tightened, and the air in the car grew heavy, pressing down on me like a weight. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and the forest around us seemed to close in, the trees leaning toward the road like they were alive. "Who? What are you?" I croaked, barely able to get the words out. She tilted her head, her black eyes narrowing. A warning. Before I could respond, the temperature plummeted, and frost spread across the inside of the windshield. The shadows outside the car began to move, writhing like they were alive. A low growl echoed through the night, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I grabbed the door handle, desperate to get out, but it wouldn't budge. The growling grew louder, more guttural, and the shadows pressed closer, their shapes becoming more defined. They were figures now, humanoid but wrong, their limbs too long, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Drive," her voice commanded, though she was still outside the car. "I can't," I shouted, slamming my fists against the steering wheel. "Drive," she repeated, louder this time. The engine roared to life on its own, and the car lurched forward.